Hi, Gregory. Is that right? Carmen Nayasha. Okay. Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Carmine, is that how you pronounce? I'm going to go through each one, and for the benefit of, well, it's really great to put faces to names, by the way. But I am also in the corner to my left, which could be to your right. We have Stephen White, who's our guest presenter today, from the Faculty of Business Law. So, but before I hand over to Stephen, what I want to do is just quickly, I want to hear your voices, because part of the whole public policy process and everything else is about communicating and engaging, right? You know, we've got, so can we start with Gregory, and maybe just quickly, maybe you were so serious, and I thought, oh my God, am I going to get a smile? I did. Can you just introduce, you know, the uni and maybe what your area of research is? Because I've got a few I've listed down here, but didn't get them all. So Gregory, would you like to start, and then we'll go to Carmine and I'll go along there, if that's all right.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, Gregory. I'm studying at the University of Sunshine Coast in Queensland. I'm part of the business and creative industries faculty. I'm mostly focusing on, because I'm in Beijing, so I'm looking at foreigners in Beijing and how it's evolved now from precarity to precarity. So there's a bit of public policy involved with that, because creative industries came from public policy. It's kind of an invention. That's part of the interest why I have in public policy in this program.
Good, great, excellent. Thank you so much, Gregory. Carmen, I have an Italian background, obviously, so I look at Carmine, I want to pronounce it in Italian. Is that?
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think my parents knew that it was an Italian boy's name when they named me. They just liked it how it looked on paper. So
it looks pretty.
it's Carmen. It's Carmen. Yeah, but my mom called me Carmina because she was German. So
oh, che bello.
So
lovely.
I'm used to all sorts of different ways to pronounce my name. I'll respond to all of them. I'm also from the University of the Sunshine Coast, and I was kind of curious when Gregory, you said that, and then I was like, how come I haven't seen you around? And then you said you're in Beijing. Well, that makes sense. So, so I'm based down near Maroochydore in Queensland, and my research is in climate change, peer advocacy, particularly how we communicate to our friends and family. And it's not so much, and the ripple effects that occur from that, but not so much the receiving end of that communication, but what motivates people to actually engage in that conversation, and what are the perceived barriers. And I'm only at the very early stages of my PhD, but my hope is to create a tool that in which empowers people to feel confident, to have conversations, and if that makes a difference in how they perceive climate change and sense of hopelessness and whatnot. My background's in psychology. And obviously with issues around climate change, policy is quite an informative tool. And I think as individuals, we have very little impact that we can make around reducing our emissions and mitigating. However, collectively, we are a voice, and that voice, when used, can really influence how we shape our government's actions and policies around climate change. So.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Carmen. Carmen, thank you. That's great. Monica, would you share with us, please?
Good morning, everybody. Hi, thanks, Anna. I am a PhD student in the School of Law. And so, like Carmen, I'm also looking at climate justice and the impact that climate change is having on the legal needs of vulnerable folk in our community. And this course is kind of blowing my mind a little bit because, you know, as someone who's been trained with a legal background, everything kind of gets reduced to law. And so the policy making process I've always kind of imagined as something that is about agitating for law reform, and in that very sort of authoritative way. So I've always had a kind of a very pithy understanding about what policy more broadly looks like when it's not elevated to the sort of, I guess, the state of, you know, law and legislation and regulations. So I'm also catching up, because as soon as this course started, I got COVID, and then school holidays happened. So I'm sort of doing a little bit of catch-up work. So I kind of know people's names from the discussion boards, but I haven't really been posting really much yet. But I will be doing that for the latter part of the course. So thank you. It's nice to be here.
Great. No, that's great. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for being here, Monica. It's lovely, and I'm glad you've recovered from COVID, honestly. Now,
we have Mary Allen in a chat as well, if you want to read it.
Yes. Yeah, Mary Allen here. I'm in a shared silent area in QUT's Kelvin Grove campus. Won't be able to speak. That's fine, Mary Helen. And she also says, I'm finishing an MPhil on the Queensland government's response to AIDS from 1983 to 1987. It is really a study on the leadership of Premier John Bjelke-Petersen. Yes, the controversial Premier. Yes, I'm of that age where I remember him. Interesting that. Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. That's great for sharing. Taylor, I think, is next.
Yeah, I'm also in a shared space, so I'll be quite quick. I just started a PhD in textiles. I don't come from law or public policy. I just saw this course was available and I thought it looked interesting, because I think this is quite a complex industry, and there's a lot of changes that need to happen, and I was just interested to see what public policy is, and whether there's scope to introduce regulations or strategies to improve the textiles industry.
Yeah. As we go through each of you speaking, because I really recognize your names and the actual areas that you're researching slowly. But Taylor, yours is very interesting, because I'd never thought about the textile industry the way that you're researching it at the moment. Nyasha, are you able to talk to us?
Hi, Anna. Good morning, everyone. And I will switch on my video for a little bit.
Great.
Morning. So my name is Nyasha. I'm in the School of Justice. I'm doing my PhD. I'm in my third and final year. So I'm past the fieldwork phase of my research, and what moved me to sign up for this course was how a lot of my respondents talked about the divergence. And I love that word. As soon as I read about it in this past week's course, I was like, that's what I'm trying to talk about, that gap between policy, what's out there and what's on the ground. And my research focuses on marginalized young people in an authoritarian context, using Zimbabwe as a case study. So again, just looking at how young people are left out in the discussions, how the resources are made available, but they never actually trickle down. People don't even know, there's no information. Just a lot of, we've got this for the youth, we've got that for the youth, but it's not being implemented at all. And I've really enjoyed the other discussions when I'm not so focused on youth marginalization around climate change. And everyone's contributions as well. So it's been really interesting for me. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Nyasha. That's great. I think the last one now is Catherine. Sorry to make you wait so long, Stephen. Catherine, are you able to talk to us?
Hi there. Yes, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, I can.
Sorry, I'm late.
No, you're fine. Just quickly to introduce, what university are you from and what's your research area, Catherine, just to briefly overview.
So I'm based in Brisbane at QUT, Queensland University of Technology, and I'm doing a PhD in public health nutrition, looking at how families practice eating together.
Great. Okay, excellent. All right, I think we better move on to Stephen now as our guest presenter. we've sent information about Stephen, and I hope you've had time to look at the link, providing his background. He's a postdoctoral research fellow. I do have to read some of this out because I think it's important. Is that all right?
Yeah, qualifications are everything. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, no. They are, aren't they? Sorry, go on.
I'll just share my screen and you can, yeah, I'll give you my slides.
Oh, great. Okay.
Can you guys see my slides?
Yes.
Yes, and they're moving?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
You
cool.
might want to rotate the screen, flip the display settings because we're seeing your presenter mode.
Okay, we can see your notes.
Okay. Well, that's technology. I'm going to struggle with this. How do I do that?
Yeah, you're on the right thing. So yeah.
too
All right, wow, there we go. Excellent. University of Technology. Wow.
Perfect.
Yeah. Sorry, Anna, I interrupted you. Sorry.
No. You go ahead and interrupt. I'm trying to get the right lighting in my room. I hope it's okay.
It's the lighting's, you look great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
So,
no,
hi,
you go. Go
hi,
on, you
everyone.
go.
Yeah,
I
hi, I'm
thi- I-
Steve. As Anna said, I'm a postdoc in the Centre for Behavioural Economics, Society and Technology, which is a one of the 6 tier 1 centres at QUT. I'm based in the Faculty of Business and Law, and my master's and my PhD is in microeconomics. But effectively now I work with the director of the centre, Professor Uwe Dulich, on public policy, and particularly in things like applied health. And I'm going to talk a little bit today. I think Mary Ellen's example about the Bjelke-Petersen government and the response to HIV is sort of a really good example of what I'm going to talk about today in relation to when there are these, major health events or major social issues. That's why we have government. We charge government with the opportunity and the power to step in and try and help us as a social collective to fix some of these problems. But as we know, politicians are human, just like the rest of us, and they make mistakes, and that's where we have market failure, and sometimes we have what's known as government failure, or what economists call government failure. So I'm a special kind of economist. I'm a behavioural economist. Behavioural economics has been around since about the 70s. It was championed by a guy named Herbert Simon, who was a psychologist at the time, and he used to hang around the economists, and he didn't like them too much. So he sort of took economics off in this different direction. But you may have seen Richard Thaler won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. Cass Sunstein worked with the Obama administration, and you may have read Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman's book, which is a very famous book about behavioural economics, but more about behavioural science in general. And it's, thinking about taking these sort of neoclassical foundations of things like price and quantity, but incorporating, cognition and emotion and having a more holistic understanding of behaviour. Because I think the biggest misconception when it comes to economics is that economics is the study of the economy, and it's not. Economics can be used to analyse the economy, but economics really is the study of efficiency. It's the study of decision-making under constraint, which is what we face every day. You wake up and you have to go to work, you have to make choices about what you do at work, you spend time with your kids or your family. So you have these finite resources, and you're effectively trying to make the maximum allocation of those resources, which is what economists call utility. But so, and again, I'm going to blow our own trumpet because behavioral economists are the best, but economics really can be applied to the study of anything, because it is, like I said, it's the study of human decision-making and how we have these trade-offs. If I can take you back to, year 10 economics, or, introductory economics in your undergrad, talk about opportunity cost and maximization, these words that economists use, and they're relevant in all those settings. The economy, the government, in your business, if you've got a health issue or medical, someone was doing a law topic before, STEM, all of these areas, we're trying to do the best we can with what we have. And that's why economics is relevant. Talking about where it can be relevant, well, economics really is a way of thinking rather than actually, when I talk with my undergrads, we're just trying to sell, we're introducing a behavioural economics undergraduate next year. And I've been going out to schools, and a lot of the kids say at the schools, what sort of job will I have if I do behavioural economics? And I say to them, and you guys are all in research, this, it's not about a job, it's not about a title, it's about developing a skill set, an analytical toolbox that then you can go and you can tell everyone everywhere how good you are because you can do the analysis and you can be that person. Here's some of the examples of some of the research I've done with the Best Centre. And we've published in everything from how women choose breast reconstruction options in applied health, to how we measure bisexuality, and even, you know, whether mobility restrictions during the COVID pandemic work. I mean, that's probably the best public policy out of those three. But it just shows you the diversity of what, you know, what economics is in relation to its application. I'm going to, here's De Niro, one of my favorite movies. Economists call, so lots of times when you make a choice as a consumer or you're a producer, lots of times there's disproportionate information in the market. So, and this is the example with De Niro is taxis. You know, before we had Uber and Google Maps, if you went to a different city and you jumped into a cab, the cabbie could drive you around and around and around, and you wouldn't know any different. So, and you think, well, that's, you know, maybe that's a blue collar thing. You know, that's someone low skilled labor trying to take advantage of the market. No, the research sort of shows that across the board, even in high skilled labor roles, is that when people have disproportionate power, or not power is the wrong word, disproportionate information to make an informed decision, often we don't know whether or not we're getting exactly, that'll be right, whether we're getting exactly what we paid for. So this is one whole space I work in applied health, is that, you know, how do we help novice consumers, whether it's in an elective surgery or whether it's something in relation that's diagnostic in relation to their health? How do we help them to make an informed decision about the elective surgery or the procedure that they're going through? But also too, how do we help these experts, producers, you know, your surgeons, your GPs, your palliative care nurses, how do we help those people to make better decisions as well? This comes back to the policy side of it. The other space I work in is what's known as cognitive and behavioral bias. And sometimes when we make these decisions, we assume that, and again, neoclassical economics has these basic assumptions, is that we make these rational choices, but we know there's lots and lots of things that impede our ability to make an informed decision. I'll give you the example on the left. My mum, she lives out at Aspley, and in the 2011 floods, her unit got flooded. It flooded out a garage and it came up to the front step of her property. And at the time I said, Mum, you should probably move. And she said, no, once in 100 years. And then in February this year, guess what happened to my mum's place? It didn't just go up to the front door, it went into and 3 feet washed away all of her property in the bottom part of her house. It's what's known as neglect of probability or probability bias. And if you think about, well, here's my mum making a huge financial and economic decision about where she lives, but the way that she processes the information in relation to the probability of risk is flawed. If you think about this in a health setting, often what we do is when we say, you know, a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer or a man's diagnosed with prostate cancer, and the doctor says to them, look, you've got an 80% chance of survival. No, you don't. The reality is you either do survive or you don't. It's a 0 or a 1. But the way that we frame information to patients is fundamentally wrong in relation to how they process the information. And this is one of the spaces we work in. I'll just touch on it again when we talk a little bit more about the applied setting. The other one is what's known as confirmation bias. And we're all guilty of this, not just anti-vax movement or vaccine hesitancy. It's when you get into an argument with someone and you say, I'm right. And they say, no, you're not. And then you use information that is completely biased to your argument without being independent. And the vaccine hesitant group there is definitely a confirmation bias example. The public policy, we get to the public policy. Here's an example from last year, January 2021, and it was in relation to vaccine hesitant groups. Remember we had that whole respiratory thing called COVID? Does everyone remember that? Yeah, okay. And what happened during COVID well, what's interesting from a policy perspective, the greatest intervention that saved us arguably is not the epidemiology, it's the behavioral, the behavioral policy. Hey, everyone, wash your hands. It's ridiculous that we have to say that, but, wash your hands, social distance, stay inside when we have lockdowns. They're all applied behavioral policy. And that worked really well. But then when the vaccine came along, the government sort of really dropped the ball and lost its mind. First, it was a race, then it wasn't a race. We didn't have enough of the vaccine. We didn't have enough of the right vaccine. And here's an example of one of the policy interventions that happened last year. And Health Minister Greg Hunt said $24 million advertising campaign will be rolled out across TV, radio, print, social, and digital media. At the time, I was at a conference, and I remember saying to the entire conference, that won't work. It won't change. That policy will not change people's behavior in any way. And I'm going to explain to you why. Well, here's the outcome. Yeah. As at 8th of November, 2021, local government associations, there's lots and lots of parts of New South Wales there that are still only around the 65. So the policy didn't work. We spent $24 million on advertising, and it didn't have the affected outcome. And this is the argument around why economists talk about efficiency. Well, that 24 million could have been spent on something else. It could have been spent on, this is opportunity cost. It could have been spent on different vaccines, on vaccine production. It could have been spent on hospital beds. And from a public policy perspective, we want to think about how we can maximize the use of, whether it's these funds or people's engagement. The campaign that they used was a whole heap of medical experts. And I'm going to show you why that was doomed to fail. Here's some of the publications that have resulted from the research that we've put together. But yeah, as you can see there, as an economist, I'm not really interested in publishing in economics journals. I'm interested in publishing in journals of the discipline that we're trying to help. Someone talked before about, why you're passionate about research is because it's applied. You want to help the people in the space that you're trying to do the research. Otherwise, it's just lip service. So who knows what this is? Take a guess.
In the same breast implant?
Yeah, it's a silicon saline breast implant, and it's a defective one. This was actually inside a woman. Highly toxic. They're actually 1 in every 3 silicon saline implants that goes in has corrective surgery and or comes out in the first 18 months. That's not 1 in every 3 women. That's 1 in every 3 implants. So shocking, really, really shocking. But this is a hugely utilized medical intervention. 1 in 7 Australian women will develop breast cancer in their lifetime, and more than half have a reconstruction if they're below 50 years of age. So the implant in itself is hugely important in the medical space, but it's very, very bad for you. It's highly toxic. So I work with a couple of biomaterials engineers here at QUT, and they've come up with this 3D polymer printed scaffolding. And what they do is before mastectomy, they scan the breast and then they print a 3D scaffold, the thing on the right, and they insert it under the muscle and then take muscle from your thigh and pump it into the scaffold, and the scaffold dissolves across 12 to 18 months, and you regrow the breast. Incredible technology, incredible technology. They're trialing it. They've trialed it successfully with pigs and rats, and now they've just had the first ever trial with a human. So, back to the public policy, how do we get people to transition to new technologies when these new technologies are so much better for them, but we have these ingrained biases that don't allow us to welcome or engage new tech? And you can see where I'm sort of drawing a little bit of a link with the vaccine rollout. It's the exact same thing. We have this great technology, but who cares? If we can't get people to consume it, it's unsuccessful, and it's a social loss. We ran this survey in 2018 and 2019. It was the largest ever study of current or former breast cancer patients. It was, I think, more than 700 observations. Yeah, 761 quantitative survey data for breast and endocrine surgeons and breast care nurses. And basically, we asked them a whole heap of questions about their experiences and about how they would transition to a new technology if it presented to them. Because this is what the biomaterials, his name's Professor Dietmar Humacher and Dr. Laura Bray. They're both at Kelvin Grove. So here's one of the questions we asked them, and this is the behavioural economics of it. Here's Jonathan. Okay, Jonathan's an ex-professional football player for Queensland. After he finished playing professionally, Jonathan became a physical education teacher at a local high school. Jonathan has 2 sons, both of whom are excellent athletes. So here's the question we asked. Which is more likely? Jonathan coaches a local football team, or Jonathan coaches a local junior football team and plays a little seniors football with the local pub team? What do we think? Which one is more likely? Can I get a show of hands for number one? Can I get a show of hands for number two? I can't see everyone's hand, so we'll just keep going. So which is more likely? What's the question asking you? The question's asking you, what's more likely? It's not asking you about Jonathan. It's not, you know, that's Jonathan Thurston. He plays for Queensland. He's a footballer. This is all what psychologists call priming. It's just asking you which is more likely. Here we have one probability. Yeah, we're going to say that there's an outcome that he coaches a football team. That's anywhere between 0 and 1. It either does happen or it doesn't. And we'll say for argument's sake, it's a flip of a coin, so it's 50-50. Here we have two outcomes. Jonathan coaches a local junior football team and Jonathan plays a little seniors football. So there's two outcomes there. And we know, arguably again, if they're 50-50, if you multiply two decimals together, the probability is less. So this one is more likely, A. Congratulations to everyone who said A. What we've found, this is what's known as, yay, there'll be a prize in the mail for you, don't worry. This is what behavioral economists call the conjunction fallacy, and you often see it in law a lot. Is that people wrongfully join together the likelihood of multiple events to craft a story for themselves. And again, why is this bad? I mean, 3 out of every 4 breast cancer patients in our sample, 574 of them. Why is this bad? Again, because we explain to women, or we explain to anyone in the health system, we give them probabilities and we give them numerical values, but we know that people are very, very bad at math. The other one is, oh no, I won't touch on this one because I won't have enough time. This is a really interesting one just from a human behavior perspective. So we asked the patient, we asked the surgeon, and we asked the nurse in your first consultation after you were diagnosed with breast cancer, how long did you spend with each other? And when we asked the patient, they said they hung out with the surgeon in their first meeting for about 39 minutes, 38 minutes. And with the nurse, they spent about 27 minutes. If we go back to this credence argument, again, you have this highly informed producer and this novice consumer. So it's really important that we get these two parties communicating effectively from a policy perspective, because we want to maximize for the consumer. We want to maximize their utility. We want them to be completely understanding what is happening for them so they can make an informed decision. And we also want the surgeon and the nurse working in unison to support that person. So that's pretty straightforward. What about the surgeons? Well, we asked the surgeons, how long did you spend with the patient the first time? And they said, oh, about 45 minutes. And then we asked them, how long did your nurse spend with the patient? And they said, oh, only about 21 minutes. What about when we ask the nurses the same question? Well, the nurses say the surgeon only spends about 30 minutes, but the nurse spends about 49. So what you see here is, I shouldn't laugh, but it is, you know, here are these two experts and they're supposed to be supporting each other and working in unison to support the patient. But both of them have a different view on how the other expert is interacting with that consumer. That's bad. I mean, there's no way to get around that. And it's a bit more than just saying, you know, in a workplace, oh, doctors don't like nurses or nurses don't like doctors. You know, it's not the set of mash. Like there's some major issues there. And this is just a primer study for a large NHMRC grant that we're just about to do. The other really interesting one that I wanted just to touch on is we asked, again, this comes back to this informed consent perspective. How when you decided to have a reconstruction after your mastectomy, who made the decision? Was it your decision or was it the doctor's? And we see up here in figure B, these mandolins. This is 100% my decision. So we're talking from the patient's perspective. This is 0% my decision. Now, if you think about what the individual is doing there, they're there to make a decision in their own best health and best interest based on the information that they're given from this expert producer. The expert producer, who is the surgeon, technically, from a legal perspective and from an informed consent perspective, should play no role in the actual choice. Yes, in the information process, but not in the choice. We had lots and lots of women here who said, look, it was 100% my decision. That's great. That's effective, interaction between the producer and the consumer. Then we had a lot that said, oh, well, it was 50-50, the doctor's decision and my decision. And you think, well, that's not too bad either. I mean, we say there's a couple of models inside health. I don't know if anyone's doing health research, where we've moved away from this sort of paternalistic model of diagnosis and intervention to what's called a shared decision-making model in health, where the consumer is supposed to be much more highly engaged in the process. And you think, well, if they're saying 50-50, you could build that argument to a shared model. The problem is here is we have hundreds of women who said the choice to have a reconstruction was zero their decision, zero their choice. If I take you all the way back to the silicon saline implant at the start and this effective policy, well, you know that 1 in 3 of those implants is going to come out in the first 18 months. And then there is this huge chunk of women that are saying, I didn't have any choice. So when the corrective surgery happens, they go back before the doctor and they say, you made that decision. It was an incorrect decision. Now I have to undergo surgery, further surgery. It's your fault. The legality there alone from the informed consent perspective is a huge problem, but even just from a public policy perspective in relation to health funding, that's a really bad outcome. Like I said, these are just primer studies and we're going on to do a bit more in this space. I won't do this one. This is the end of it. And this is, I think, is the most interesting thing. We asked all of these surgeons, these nurses and these patients, look, if you could go to this new amazing technology, this biomaterials technology where you could regrow your own breast, where would you want to get information from about that would convince you to go and try this new technology? And what we saw was for surgeons and for nurses, it's dominated by this. I think I'm colorblind. Is that salmon and that's red? Yeah, okay, cool. Maybe I'm not. Someone said to me the other day, yeah, anyway. So for surgeons and nurses, it's dominated by these two sections. They want their information in relation to a new technology from peer-reviewed journals or from the regulator. Why? Well, obviously, they're highly institutionalized doctors and nurses. They go through years and years and years of training, follow procedure. Of course, we would expect them to go to these regulatory bodies and peer, to the science. What about patients? Well, patients, they're all in this blue shading, 2/3 of it's dominated, and it's all about from a successful patient. They want to, for all the good little Catholic boys and girls in the room, it's the story of the doubting Thomas, who needed to touch Jesus's hands to see for himself. Patients want to speak to someone who's gone through the process so that they know that it's sound. Yeah. The doctors and the nurses, yeah, they're there to inform them and guide them. But at the end of the day, they want their information from a different space. They want it from the horse's mouth. Now let's go back to, here we go. And this is why I said, and I was absolutely right because I'm an economist, is that ad campaign was never going to work. That $24 million spent from a policy perspective on marketing towards having expert doctors inform people and convince them to take AstraZeneca or whatever, that was never going to work. And we actually were talking with Queensland Health, the best centre I work with. We were talking with Queensland Health at the time about doing some research on marketing campaigns that involved people who had already had the jab and had survived. They didn't grow an extra head out the side of their neck. They weren't uploaded into the 5G network. That would have made a big difference. Having experts paternalistically talk down to people, that ad campaign was never going to work. Are these issues going away? No. Technology adoption or moving into credence markets and moving into new tech, it's just going to become bigger and bigger. I mean, we had the Royal Commission into Aged Care. I think everything I see here at this university is talking about AI and robotics in aged care, which I think is incredible. Imagine the cost savings there and the extra support that we could provide. But again, you have to believe in the tech. And here's Elon putting electricity in his car. I mean, the electric car and the technology adoption here in Australia is going to be a huge issue moving forward. So from a public policy perspective, I'm fascinated by seeing how experts and novices interact in markets of consumption that are so important for them, health and education. And on education, that was a good segue. If you're ever considering a graduate certificate in behavioral economics, QUT offers that. It's only one semester, and I don't teach it, but the guy I did my PhD with, Benno Torgler, who is, I think, one of the best behavioral economists in the world, he teaches this course. And we also, if you've got any kids or nephews or nieces, or you're thinking about doing another undergraduate yourself, next year we launch a behavioral economics undergraduate here at QUT, which is the first Bachelor of Business Behavioral Economics in Australia, which is very, very exciting. It might get me a permanent position after this postdoc. And other than that, that's all of the amazing people that have contributed to this research. And yeah, thanks very much for allowing me to wax lyrical about my science, guys.
That's been fabulous. Thank you so much, Stephen. I've certainly learned a lot, and I can tell from some of the chat there that there are the others are kind of like, oh wow, okay. This reminds me of. So yeah, I know. I was actually going. I hope you have the time, and I hope Ola. I always rely on Alexandra to kind of keep me in check with the time.
Yeah, it's all good.
Oh, good. Carried away. Stephen, are you able to take questions from our
absolutely.
colleagues?
I've got I've got a couple of minutes. Yeah, however many. Yeah.
You can tell us when you need to go.
Okay.
If anyone has a question, would you like to raise your hand and you can ask Stephen directly? Okay, Gregory, that's great.
Yeah, I've worked on a similar project as a designer, and I find this as a communication design problem, that the people aren't informed, they don't have the materials at hand. So I was working with JDRF,
okay,
and they had a problem. They wanted a material that would both medical professionals can use, but also at the same time the patient. And it's kind of, it needs to be I would approach this as a designer, because we solve these problems all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Using observation and
yeah, in our center,
yeah.
I mean, that's what is great about the BEST Center. We don't just have economists, we've got social marketers as well. And for a very long time, I mean, you're very pigeonholed as a scientist, you do your PhD, and I used to hang a lot of shit on marketers all through and different social science disciplines. But it wasn't until I sat down and started working with, her name's Professor Rebecca Russell-Bennett, and looking at the symmetry in a lot of, it's our languages that differ. I say utility, she says value proposition, and like we make fun of each other. It's the same thing. We're talking about the same thing. And she comes at it from a very different perspective, like you're saying, from a design or a social marketing perspective. I think when you get teams together, you're sort of a bit stuck when you're doing your PhD or your master's, and you don't get an opportunity to work with a lot of people. You're just working with your supervisor, and it's always a recommendation of mine for any of my HDRs is try and find external supervisors or work with other people to get a different perspective. It makes your research so much more robust.
Yeah, that's what we do as designers. We don't look at industry. We learn about everything and then put it all together. We're kind of the glue, but we're not as relevant anymore. That's why I'm moved away from it.
You just got to get out there and make yourself relevant, mate. No, you got to sell the product. You got to sell the product. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to say, Stephen, that I thought that was actually a really great, simple explanation of behavioral economics. It's something I'm really interested in. And previously to my PhD, I did my honors in climate change skepticism, looking at those like motivated reasoning biases in decision making as well. So I was kind of like touching on, and it kind of got me to thinking about how, especially in the climate change space, we have researchers. The IPCC keeps going, this is what's going on, this is what's going on, this is what's going on. All the scientists are doing, here's the data, but knowing that we're all very biased as humans, how we can transfer that and work with behaviorists.
I think the COVID thing was really interesting, is because we had in Australia, particularly, we had gone through a government and we had had a lot of media that climate's not an issue, climate's not an issue. Don't listen to the scientists, don't listen to the scientists. And then, you know, I make a lot of fun of Scott Morrison because he's easy to make fun of. But one of the best things he did at the start of COVID was, do you remember he had these media conferences and there was him and then there was the scientist beside him, and he was like, he attached himself to the science. And it sort of was his downfall because he said, oh, you know, follow the science for the pandemic, but then don't worry about it for climate afterwards. But the two parallels were super interesting, and the way that, again, this goes back to design and marketing, is about the way that we communicate and effective communication for these huge issues. They're huge issues. Yeah, super interesting. The climate space is crazy. Yeah.
We have, I think, a question now. I can see a raised hand and a student number. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the number, but I think it's interested to hear more about government failure. Am I correct?
Yeah, sorry. So government failure is, so market failure is when, again, at an introductory level where supply doesn't meet demand. And you think about with the vaccine rollout, is we know that not enough people were consuming the vaccine, consuming as in, you know, getting the jab. So we have this, what's known as this disequilibrium or non-socially optimal equilibrium. So you need to tweak the market. And this is where the government steps in to correct this market failure. But often, lots of times, governments step in and they stuff it up. And that's what's known as government failure. You know, they either oversupply or undersupply, and we sort of had that with the vaccine rollout. We had this sort of correction where, remember, AstraZeneca would kill you if you took it, and if you were under the age of whatever, and that was a government failure, you know, at a state and federal level. But it was also that was around the marketing, but then there was also about the rollout in relation to the production side of it. So government failure is anywhere where a government tries to step in and fix the problem, but they make it worse. That's government failure.
Okay. That's great. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, thanks for that explanation. And it's certainly expanding my background and my knowledge of economics. And you're actually interesting me in what in your courses.
Do the grad cert, definitely do the grad cert. Yeah. Monica, you had a question?
Go on. Yes, Monica, please.
Yeah, just following on from that description of government failure, I think this week's content is looking at, or maybe it was last week's, you know, the difference between proactive and reactive government policy. So have you got examples, Stephen, of where you've seen in the proactive space, which seems to be more challenging for government, you know, policy done well?
Yeah, so again, I don't want to harp on the pandemic, but the government had procedures to put in place. You know, I know we hadn't had, again, it's like my mum with the flood, we hadn't had a pandemic in 100 years since Spanish flu, but we had these protocols. You know, they could have, but instead, governments are risk averse. They're always going to be risk averse. And this goes back to the very fundamental core of economics, this opportunity cost. If they make a decision now and it's wrong, where they can just sit on their hands and let's see what unfolds. And that was very much what the government did. We saw at state and federal levels, the government sort of just let it sort of happen rather than actively engage. Can I think of examples where governments have been proactive? I think the Biden government has just signed up that all fleet cars in the US market will be electric within the next 5 years or something. I think that's a really proactive policy. I know it's very late but I mean, if you go back in Australian history, someone's talking about the Bjelke-Petersen government. If you go all the way back to Whitlam, you know, the introduction of universal healthcare, Medicare, the HECS, you know, universities funding or students being able to HECS their debt. They're very proactive and they're very long-term, you know, investing in yours and my education. I mean, if you're doing PhD and you're domestic, it's free. And that's great for the federal government because they know in the long run you'll pay more tax. But you're also, you know, if you're a higher income earner, you're less likely to be involved in, you know, illicit substance abuse. You're not going to go down to the 7-Eleven and roll it with a shotgun. You're more likely to have private healthcare. so those sorts of proactive public policies. And again, they're very different to a lot of other countries. I mean, the US doesn't have this. It has a free market when it comes to university, to tertiary education. Didn't Finland or somewhere just the other day say 180 days for maternity leave for men and women? I think that's a great model. Like that's really investing in adolescent care by both parents. We're still a long way behind that here in Australia. There's a couple of examples. Sorry, I rabbited off in different directions.
Unmute me. Yeah, no, I think that's great. Because I think that the more examples in a way kind of touches our diversities in research and areas of interest, as well as anything else. Are there any other questions?
At the start, when everyone introduced yourselves, all of you are applied behavioral researchers. All of the examples that you gave me about your research, you're all, if you wanted to call yourselves applied behavioral economists, you could. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're looking at, the outcome of X intervention or whatever stochastic shock. Again, the Joe Giochi-Peterson one's a great one. How did the state government respond to this particular statewide or national event? Super interesting. Sorry, Anna. Yeah.
No. Please keep going. We're enjoying that. These poor students.
I can come back next week if you want. No.
Yeah, definitely. You do the wrap-ups for me instead, and much more interesting, I'm sure. Are there any other questions of Stephen, or any other queries, or just wanted to add something?
Well, yeah, I don't want to hog it though, so I
no, go for it. Take advantage of it, Monica.
Well, I mean, the example you shared of your mum getting flooded 2 times in a row. I mean, the issue of managed and forced retreat as adaptation from climate change is so huge, and I think is only sort of really now starting to be grappled with. And so there's the whole stack of law and regulation and public policy tied up with people's choice. We're witnessing in northern New South Wales, a lot of people are choosing homelessness because of their connection to place over the option to move. So, I mean, I've got no sort of specific question, just kind of thoughts around that, but maybe you have.
No, I think that's just, again, that's just super interesting from a behavioral perspective, that someone would take or drive down their standard of living to stay in an area that they know. We're a crazy species. Like, as we do things that don't make any logical sense. I have a study with, I don't know if you know, in the Faculty of Law, or we're all in the same faculty now, Tina Colburn and Kelly Purser. We were just looking at will making during COVID, in how to impact behavior. A lot of the law is very stringent. It's very black and white. And to witness something, to witness something, have something witnessed, a last will and testament during the COVID pandemic, they relaxed the laws so you could do it online. And we wrote a paper, it's just been accepted to the Minnesota Journal of Law or something. And but we're stuck in the law fraternity don't want to, this is how we've witnessed things for 200 or 300 years or whatever. Oh, we can't change it. No, the way our species is going and the events, this is you're saying about, the hydrological issues in relation to geography and all these things, we're being pushed in different ways now where we have to change and we have to think about doing things in different ways, but we're stuck in our behaviors. And yeah, I think that's going to be a huge challenge. The one you were talking about, even my mum now, she's not moving a third. She'll get flooded a third or a fourth time, poor thing. And I'm only upset because I have to help her move every time. But
I think it's got particular resonance as well for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, if it's their country too, sure. Which is a whole other kind of level of complexity. Thank you.
No worries at all. I'm getting the director of the centre is telling me I have to go for lunch with him. So I have to love you
You?
and leave.
Okay, well, you enjoy your lunch.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Stephen,
No
on
worries at
behalf
all.
of
Pleasure.
it. Fantastic. And we're
Yeah.
definitely going to have you again.
Okay,
If
awesome.
that's
If you
okay with
guys
you.
have any questions or whatever, or interested in the research in the Best Centre, just shoot me an email. Yeah, it's sg.white@QUT. Anna can chuck up my email. So
Oh, don't worry. I'll chuck all
Good.
the information about you there.
good luck with the rest of the course, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Well, everyone, Alexandra, how are we going for time? I've left my phone over there. So can anybody tell me how we're running for time?
It's 11:52.
11:52. So what, we've got eight minutes. Okay, I think. Yeah. I just wondered, I know some of you have left, but I just wondered if any of you have any queries or questions about well, even about what Stephen was talking about, but also about, you know, how you're going with the course, how you're going with the resources, what you want more from me and what you want less. You know, maybe you want shorter responses, and I don't know. But you know, I'm here to support, and so is Alexandra. As you can see, I don't know what we'd do without Ola running all of this. But are there any queries or questions from any of you at this point? No? Yes, Carmen.
I haven't, so please forgive me if this is covered later on, but I have only just started this week's modules, and you know, the first kind of couple learning objectives were around how wicked problems and the complexity of these dynamic systems that are happening. And then it kind of got to the complexity part where you have the list of the different elements and relationships. And I was really confused by the time frame one, where some of these time frames for looking at policy cycles can take 20 to 40 years. And I thought that was actually quite strange, seeing how dynamic and shifting the spaces are sometimes, especially say, for example, climate change, and how policies kind of, you know, the need for action is really quite evident in how complex the system is. So if we're taking the time to review our policies and you know, implement and then review over 40 years, it seems a bit odd to me. That's all.
Well, I guess, you know, I don't know. I recently heard an ABC radio program, and the speaker, and I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, but I'm very happy to upload her onto the unannounced. She was talking about the fact that we were made aware of these climate change issues about 30 years ago. And I think we're all aware of the discussions that went on, you know, Clinton's I'm trying to think of the names of the key players, but his vice president was a key player in actually promoting and working towards people recognizing the importance of climate change, etc., etc. And of course, he was debunked by a number of scientists. And, you know, the politics, as we look at public, the politics behind the scenes on who's making the money and who's not making the money in terms of maintaining and upholding a certain status quo, plays just as much a role as anything else in public policy. So basically, at the end of the day, what she said was, if we had done 30 to 40 years ago, and we had listened and put into place what we're looking at putting into place now, then when we had the information, nothing's changed, only it's gotten worse, we would not have had the problems we have today that we do with climate change. And I don't know if that's really answering your question. And maybe I should just have a look at, is that helping at all or not? No?
Yeah, I love the explanation. That was really good. But I was meaning more like, maybe I just need to go through the content a little bit more and understand it. I just came across the time framers one, and I was like, yeah, you know, obviously these policies should have been done way, 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 way earlier. And I understand that part. It's just like, it's strange that now we're in a place where we're looking at, you know, the time frame of policy cycles. And I'm just reading this now.
Okay, maybe I should
Sometimes
have
we
another
make a
look at it
reasonable
myself.
understanding of the impact. So like making a reasonable understanding of the impact of relevant conditions can sometimes take 20 to 40 years. I think that that's just not achievable in a dynamic space. It's constantly shifting.
Okay.
That's more of where my question was. I thought that was just
Okay.
a strange thing. Yeah.
No, that's fair enough, Carmen. And I'm actually going to have to go away and reflect on that. And yeah, because I at the moment I'm not very good at putting up a number of different screens at the same time. Sorry. No, I'm not showing my age. I'm just showing, but I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I'll have another look at it, and I'll put up something on Announce. Hopefully find something for you. But yeah, okay, I'll leave it at that.
It's okay. You didn't have to have an answer. I just thought that was more of
but
what
I
I was contemplating when I read it.
No, I know. It's funny, isn't it? That, yeah, I mean, it might be something to ask. I might run past Stephen anyway. Who knows? But look, just to share with you, whoever left of you, those of you here, just quickly for me, what's been happening in terms of my own research. I've done years of research in interrelationship and domestic violence, and I've been, you know, and I'm in my sunset years, and I'm thinking, you know, what do you want to do in terms of putting something forward before you, you know, pop off, that could possibly make a difference. And I've been searching and searching, but I kind of go, it's going to come and fall on my lap. And one of the things that's hit me today, so I really thank you all for being here and being able to share this with me. Pity Stephen can't hear this, but I'll share it with him. Is that I realize that one of the key questions that keeps coming up for everyone is why women stay. And people have tried to answer this question, why women stay, from a whole range of perspectives. And because it costs a lot of money. It costs our country a lot of money for women to either stay in their relationships of domestic violence and all the hospitalization and children's service, you know, that everything that's related. I managed a women's refuge many years ago, so I have one of those eclectic backgrounds. But the other thing is that if we then put in place like restraining orders, we've done all this, but why do women really stay? Now, that's a question that's been asked since I did my first research back in the 70s. I'm showing my age now, really. That it's certainly, I've realized that with that small amount of background I've had in economics, a couple of years at uni, I realize now that the behavioral economics was what I was really, because I loved economics. I just found all they told us is that we could become statisticians, and it's like, oh no. So, sorry, I'm a bit of an actress. So, you know, that's important for me. But I have so enjoyed reading your posts on the discussion board. I have so enjoyed all of you coming along today. You know, your intellectual capabilities, your intelligence, but also the topics that you are working on. I'm so heartened as someone who is a bit of a greenie to see so many environmentalists and so many topics that are really touching on the social hearts and minds of the future. I think Ola, unless there's any other questions, we could do a wrap up. Now, I'm not sure if I've lost Ola, our wonderful coordinator. No, I hope everything's okay in the background. So are there any final comments or queries? No? Okay. All right. I'm going to say bye-bye, and I'm sure Alexandra will come any second, because we did have an hour, and I think we're pretty much finished. Am I correct?
You're just spot on with your timing today, Anna.
Oh, thank you. I was so worried. I thought, oh, what's happened to Ola? I was worried, you know, health-wise or something. No, that's great. Yeah, thank you, Alexandra. I know I often go over time, but so thank you all, and I'm really grateful to you all for sharing what you do share with me on this course. And you know, I just see such fantastic minds. I feel really privileged and honoured to be teaching you all and you teaching me. Thank you. And have a great weekend. And I look forward to hearing more from you in the final weeks of the course. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Anna.
Thanks,
Take care,
everyone.
stay
Bye.
safe.
Great hearing
Thank
from you.
Bye.
Bye, take care.
Bye. Thank you.